Hello, everyone. Tonight we're going to cover Genesis chapter 5. And just to do a quick synopsis of what the other chapters were about, you have Genesis chapter 1, which is the fattening of heaven and earth. Genesis chapter 2 was a in-scope detail of day 5 and 6, the creation of man and the certain circumstances that surrounded that occurrence, like the naming of animals and the making of a female and such like that. Then we have chapter 3. Chapter 3 is where humans have their first encounter with, I guess you can say, an adversary who didn't have the best interests at heart and trying to instruct them about approaching the tree they were commanded not to. And then chapter 4, we have our first murder, brother on brother bloodshed. And also, we have our first male and female encounter where they get together to bring forth life. Cain and his wife, or Cain and his wife, both conceive, and that is the start of his bloodline, which we read about throughout the rest of chapter 4. But there's a stark difference between Cain's bloodline and where we are now in chapter 5, Adam's bloodline. Adam's bloodline contains one unique thing that Cain's bloodline does not. Let's see if you can catch what that is. All right, so tonight we're going to be approaching chapter 5 with the Wandelian Bible study method. I will forego the color codes of the verses and this video. I'll save that for perhaps the next video, because that's a detail in of itself that must be explained. But tonight, we're gonna, it should be an easy chapter because there's not much detail and it's pretty much repetitive, you know? It's pretty much gonna detail the same information, but package it a little differently. So let's get started. All right, so if you want to read along, go ahead and break out chapter 5. We're going to watch the audio book or the all audio Bible. So it's kind of hard. It's going to be kind of hard to follow along because this is unless you have the international version. Oh no, the new international version, which this is being read from. It's going to be a little difficult to follow along. So I figured I insert the rendering or the reading of the verse or the chapter so that we could all be on the same page. If you want to do like I'm doing, I'm just going to listen.
This is the written account of Adam's family line. When God created human beings, he made them in the likeness of God. He created them male and female and blessed them. And when they were created, he called them human beings. a son in his own likeness, in his own image, and he named him Seth. After Seth was born, Adam lived 800 years and had other sons and daughters. Altogether, Adam lived a total of 930 years, and then he died. When Seth had lived 105 years, he became the father of Enosh. After he became the father of Enosh, Seth lived 807 years and had other sons and daughters. Altogether, Seth lived a total of 912 years, and then he died. When Enosh had lived 90 years, he became the father of Kenan. After he became the father of Kenan, Enosh lived 815 years and had other sons and daughters. Altogether, Enosh lived a total of 905 years, and then he died. When Kenan had lived 70 years, he became the father of Mahalaleel. After he became the father of Mahalaleel, Kenan lived 840 years and had other sons and daughters. Altogether, Kenan lived a total of 910 years, and then he died. When Mahalaleel had lived 65 years, he became the father of Jared. After he became the father of Jared, Mahalaleel lived 830 years and had other sons and daughters. Altogether, Mahalaleel lived a total of 895 years, and then he died. When Jared had lived 162 years, he became the father of Enoch. After he became the father of Enoch, Jared lived 800 years and had other sons and daughters. Altogether, Jared lived a total of 962 years, and then he died. When Enoch had lived 65 years, he became the father of Methuselah. After he became the father of Methuselah, Enoch walked faithfully with God 300 years and had other sons and daughters. Altogether, Enoch lived a total of 365 years. Enoch walked faithfully with God. Then he was no more, because God took him away. When Methuselah had lived 187 years, he became the father of Lamech. After he became the father of Lamech, Methuselah lived 782 years and had other sons and daughters. Altogether, Methuselah lived a total of 969 years, and then he died. When Lamech had lived 182 years, he had a son. He named him Noah. He will comfort us in the labor and painful toil of our hands caused by the ground the Lord has cursed. After Noah was born, Lamech lived 595 years and had other sons and daughters. Altogether, Lamech lived a total of 777 years, and then he died. After Noah was 500 years old, he became the father of Shem, Ham, and Japheth.
All right, so we start on chapter 5, the genealogy of Adam. Now, when I titled this topic, I titled it New Bloodline of Adam Until the Flood, because that's what we're reading here. Reading the new bloodline of Adam. One of the greatest controversies in this segment of scripture is that Cain doesn't appear in Adam's genealogy anywhere, nor does he appear in Cain's genealogy anywhere. And it leaves one to wonder, because remember, what we're doing is we're reading the scripture as if we never read the Bible before. And in doing so, we have to abandon the old way that we were taught to read the Bible. We have to look at everything as if we've never seen it before. So we may have ironed out what might have happened so that neither one appears in either one's bloodline. But that's not what we're doing here. We're keeping it fresh, trying to avoid too much speculation. But it's something that we should notice as reading this particular chapter like it's our first time. So it's a lot of things. What we have to do is think of those things on the spot. Unfortunately, I have an advantage because I spent like a week studying this particular chapter. And I've been wrestling for a week with this. It's hard to say, especially when his mother says, I have begotten a man with the help of the Lord. Those were her words. So I wonder if that leaves more to be addressed than what has been addressed. It's like this. Neither is Abel mentioned in Adam's bloodline, but when Seth is born, it is said that he was born to replace Abel, who Cain slew. So that leaves it wide open for a bunch of speculation. And some people have speculated thus that, okay, Eve or Kawa and the serpent laid down and they got down and conceived a child, right? But if you take notice of what's in the scripture and leave it as it is and stop using so much imagination, it clearly says that Adam knew his wife and she conceived. As if that's to say that's the result of him knowing his wife, versus Adam knew Hashatan, or not Hashatan, but Nachash, and conceived. That's a far stretch. That's stretching. That's doing scriptural acrobatics right there. And we should try to stay away from that as much as possible, but use the facts that are presented. All right, so that's where we are. Let me see. I hope this thing isn't in the way. Okay. New bloodline of Adam until the flood. Now, this is the genealogy of men in the day in which God made Adam, or Adam. In the image of God, he made him. Now, this, I don't know if you guys remember me mentioning that Genesis is made up of books. About 5 different books, if I'm not mistaken. Now, this is where the third book begins. Chapter 1 was one book that ended actually in the first verse of chapter 2. Then chapter 2 becomes a second book, or a second account of creation that's not limited to days. It's not really concerned about the days of creation. And it's not numbered by days. But this here is a third book that starts. It makes it more clear in another version of, in another translation. I'm using the Septuagint here, so it doesn't make it quite clear. But if you go over to the Hebrew column, this middle column here, and you look at these 3 words, Ze, that's that word right there is Ze. This is Sefer, and this is Toldot. Ze Sefer Toldot is basically saying this is the book of generations. Okay? So that gives you all the information you need. Some translators have translated that correctly. The Septuagint didn't do such a great job with it, but this is the book of generations. All right? So know that when you're reading Genesis, you're reading a library of books that have been compiled together to give you the story that you now read. So that's why I find it hard Genesis to have been a plagiarization of other creation stories. I really don't see Genesis mimicking any other creation stories or origin stories word for word. I see you have to use your imagination to make it fit some other sort of story. Some are so fantastical that Genesis is actually a sober version of anything else I would ever read out there. But anyway, let's continue. I don't want to get too far off into the controversy or into the things that really cause division. I want to focus on what information do we find in this chapter so that we can learn and glean from it to know more about this creator and the world he seems to be fashioning for his creation. All right, so this is the genealogy. This is the book of generations, the third book within Genesis. I addressed that already. Genesis 2:4 separates book 1 from 2. All right, and I think I said the first chapter in the second. I said the first verse in the second chapter. I was actually wrong. It's actually the fourth verse of the second chapter. Separates book 1 and 2. If you read that, you know what I'm talking about. In the day which God made Adam does seem to occur within 1,000 years. That's me kind of like piggybacking off that argument. Well, a day to God is 1,000 years, which I don't think that's a proper way to address a day, because nowhere else in the scripture does he even relates to a day as 1,000 years. I mean, you have the prophecy of Daniel, where each day that is mentioned in that prophecy is an actual year, not 1,000 years. Nowhere else in the Bible where David makes that I don't know, I forgot what you call it, but he gives that example where it's like a hyperbole comparison, if you want to call it that. It's like he's exaggerating to the nth degree. Like God is so great that a day to him is as 1,000. Well, if we're going to address a day to him as 1,000 years, then we must understand that he must live on another planet, a planet that's so large that the days on that planet are equivalent to 1,000 years on Earth. That's the only way that would make sense. Like on Jupiter, I forget how many days. I forget how many Jupiter days are Earth years, because that planet is so big and so far away from the sun that there's a difference between how many days a day is on Jupiter compared to years on the planet Earth. So we'll be getting into that if we got that deep into the conversation involving those kind of statistics, because only in one place in the Bible is that mentioned. Actually, I think 2 places, but the other place that mentions it is quoting from that one place. So, and nowhere else do we find him using that measurement for days. All right. But I was just going to play on it just here because, we find out that Adam is so old that he dies within that day, if a day is as 1,000 years. I don't like to use that. I don't like it when other people use it either, because it's not a fair comparison. It's not. All right. Male and female, he made them and blessed them, and he called his name Adam in the day in which he made them. Okay. Third retelling of the 6th day. 2 or 3 witnesses agreeing. Okay, so my point for mentioning that was out of the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses shall every word be established. I was just saying, hey, this is actually the third witness because this is the third telling of that day of creation when man was made. Also, too, since we're going there, I doubt if one person wrote this 3 different times. I'm more likely to believe that chapter 1 was one author, chapter 2 was another author, chapter 5 is another completely different author. So I think if we're going to give Moses credit for this book, I would like to believe, I can't prove it. I can't prove it. So it's got to be a belief that Moses had access to these documents and maybe stored them in a book or some piece of work of his. I don't know if the Torah is actually 4 different scrolls or 5 scrolls fitting together. It's no telling. There's no telling how this work was really originally presented. So as we go down, we get into Adam, and Adam detailing his life and the birth of his son from him and how he's the head of this genealogy. And Adam lived 230 years and begot a son after his own form and after his own image. And he called his name Seth. All right, so when a man has a son, it's after his own image, after his own form. And so I guess that could help us understand when it says that God made man in his image after his likeness. I guess because, honestly, when I first read that, I had a hard time trying to understand that. I was like, what? Because, if you read the Bible all the way through, and then you get to a part in Revelation where it says God is a spirit, and those who worship him must worship him in spirit and truth. You're trying to imagine, how can a physical thing represent a spiritual object or a spiritual deity or whatever, right? So it's a little bit more involved than that, but more involved than I want to get into in this video, because I just want to focus on what's in chapter 5 and not get too ahead of ourselves. So he gives birth to Seth, or Seth, all right? Adam is 230 when he gives birth to Seth. And one of the things we don't really consider is that we know a full person's name. Like Seth, his name is Seth bin Adam. And then, this is something that the Bible never mentions. So this is the kind of work we got to do in our own head to come up with this stuff ourselves. Seth bin Adam. I don't think they're ever called that name throughout the Bible, but it's something that it's consistent throughout the rest of the Bible. But what I'll say is this. I don't know when that system was employed. Like when I'm talking about, a child was named after the name of his father. I don't know if that came later in Abraham's day. I know in Abraham's day that it was more in effect than it was here. Okay. So I don't know if it was before it got instituted or did it get instituted here. I'm doing it myself on my own volition. I know that's not something that the Bible itself does, but it's something that I'm doing because it's true. He's Seth bin Adam, Seth, son of Adam. That would be his name. And that would be the modern rendering of his name as an Israelite. Even though these guys seem to be outside, they seem to be outside of any Israelite tribe or any Israelite family structure, right? So anyway, so he's 230 years old, Seth bin Adam. He lives for 700 more years after he gives birth to Seth, and he lives for a total of 930 years. I put that here because I thought it would be great to see the actual math of these verses, because they spell out the numbers. And it's so much more harder to remember when they're spelled out in words than they are in actual digits or numerals. And what was Adam doing for 230 years? To where only the company of a wife sufficed until he brought forth another child. Here in verse 11, genealogies with ages are listed, okay? Adam and Shem, whoever authored this book. Okay, so what I'm saying is, I'm saying a few things here. What I'm saying is, for 230 years, you mean to tell me that, okay, so far we have Adam and we have Kewa, or Eve. And then we have Cain. Only 3 people so far. We lost Abel or Habel. And so Adam and his wife are together. We know that because of the death of Abel or Habel, Cain is sent off in a separate part away from his mother and his father, or I don't know if it's mother and his father. Let's just say Adam and Eve. He's sent off to another separate part in isolation. Okay? And so if that is the case, then Adam and Eve are just existing for 230 years before another person is introduced. I'm thinking, what were they doing for 230 years? Were they somewhere building something? Were they somewhere preparing for life on the planet? Should it arrive when they decided they wanted to do it again? I mean, I would think I haven't even lived 50 years. And I can only imagine that living life without another person and just 2 of us it would be incredibly boring, especially without television, without all the creature comforts we enjoy. So it boggles my mind that they would do that. I don't know. Okay, and also I said here in this chapter 5 is the only place along with chapter 11 where ages are mentioned. There might be another genealogy somewhere nestled in the Bible. I'm not sure. I don't want to be wrong about that, so I won't say absolutely that this is the only place in chapter 11. But chapter 11 and chapter 5 are the only 2 genealogies that list ages. Let's just say up to this point, okay? We read Cain's genealogy, and it didn't list age. It didn't tell you how old nobody was when nobody gave birth. It didn't tell you how old nobody died when nobody after they gave birth, So that's unique and that's interesting. I wonder why they do that. Of course, no information is given as to why, but perhaps with a lot of brain work, we can figure that out, or not. All right. Next verse. And the days of Adam, which he lived after he begat, or after begetting Seth, were 700 years, and he begot sons and daughters. Notice, they're not mentioned. They're not mentioned because they are not involved in this lineage or this bloodline. This bloodline is particular. And when I see that he begot sons and daughters, but yet they're not mentioned, that tells me that this bloodline is focused. This bloodline is focused on a particular person. And we'll find out who that person is once we get to the bottom of it. All right. Uncommon for women to be mentioned in genealogies. In case you didn't know that, it's very uncommon for genealogies to list a woman unless she plays a pivotal part, a pivotal role in the telling of an account. Okay? The wife and daughter of someone significant. They're mentioned. Sometimes, somebody's wife who is significant to the birthing of a particular person, she'll be mentioned sometimes. I also want to say this. Now, there's something very important. No, is that the right word? Okay. For those who don't believe in the Messiah, they're missing out on a major part of the Bible because the Bible is preparing you for his arrival this early. And what I mean is, you may not be aware of this or privy to this, but I'll share this with you because this is a great known secret in the Bible, in that the Bible is coded. I'm sure some of you heard of the Bible codes, and that's not what I'm talking about here. But what I'm talking about are these names. The names of Adam, along with his progeny, they spell out something that man is supposed to be warned about. They spell out a warning. It's not really, let me say, it's less of a warning more than it is hope. Okay? So let's start with the meaning of the name Adam or Adam. Let's start with that name. Okay, Adam. Adam's name means man, as the first man, that seems straightforward enough. Okay, so man, and we'll go through each of the names as we address them and uncover their meaning. I could have sworn I had. Okay, yeah, I knew I had the Hebrew column filled out, but I guess I didn't do these. All right, so Seth. Seth is Adam's son. Son's name is Seth, which means appointed. Eve said, "For God hath appointed me another seed instead of Abel, which Cain slew." This is what I was talking about a little earlier. But so we have man appointed. What was man appointed? I guess we got to keep reading. And all the days of Adam which he lived were 930 years, and he died. And you can find that all of the lives followed this pattern. It talks about how old they were when they conceived a child, how long they lived after they conceived the child, and totality of years they were alive on the planet. When the duration of the time of the planet. But see, what we lose sight of is that Adam lived for 930 years, which would put us down by the time of who? He's not. This is not telling a story, so it'd be hard. It's hard to understand where he actually vanishes in the story. But because he says he dies here and doesn't mention him again, we fail to realize that he's alive through quite a few more people down on this list. So train your brain to see it that way. Train your brain to understand. Like, for example, what I mean by that is this. Seth is about, God, I forgot how Seth is. I think Seth is 200 years old when he gives, after the flood, he gives birth to his children. He's 200 years old, right? So he lives, I forgot how long he lives, but I can tell you this, that by the time Abraham reaches 75 years old, Seth is still alive. Seth is nearing death at that point, when Abraham is 75 years old. So this is what the Bible does not speak on these matters, but it gives you enough information to know this ahead of time so that when you're reading the stories, it expects you to keep this in mind, that this person is still alive up until this point, or know the math. And with this math, what you can do is, and scholars have done this, is they've taken all the numbers of ages of people and stuff like that, figured out how long they live, figured out when their life actually existed, and where it overlaps in the story, along with one other story. And some scholars have gone so far as to try to create a calendar based off of that, and also created, or they tell you when such and such happened. Oh, this happened in 3997 BC. And I say that's a far stretch. They didn't have a right to do that. I don't believe they're right. I believe they're wrong, because to say it's 3997 BC, I'm not saying that's what they say about this, because they have a different number. I can go find it. I have a book that tells you what year this is supposed to have happened. But I think that's ridiculous, because you have to ignore so much science, thousands of years of science, in order to say that's true. And what you're going to be doing is denouncing a bunch of artifacts that have been found, which are far older than these accounts that these scholars say existed during this time. And that messes with the validity of the Bible, so to speak. And it messes with archaeological evidence that they found, Bible archaeological evidence, information in the Bible that these archaeologists and anthropologists have looked up and dug up the earth and found artifacts that are much older than what these scholars are saying these events occurred. And so that does a great disjustice to the whole community of Bible believers. All right. And all the days of Adam, which he lived, I already read that, right? So in the time or in time for the flood, from what I understand. Okay, so basically, is when his life ended is right when the flood started to begin. When he says, "I'm going to give man 120 years on the planet before I bring the flood." When God says that, it's said that he's speaking of Adam when he says, "I'm going to give man." The actual word for man is Adam. Okay, so that's what man means, Adam. So when he says, "I'll give Adam 120 years to live before I bring in the floods," so he's going to wait until Adam's life is ended before he introduces the flood. He actually put that on hold, just to let you know. All right, where this says Adam died is not where Adam died. Near the time of Yared is more accurate, but exact math must be applied. Okay, so I'm not saying it was during the time of Jared. What I'm saying is around that time is more accurate without having done the math, but we can find out exactly when by doing the math. And that's something I haven't done. I should have done that for this study, but I don't want to do too much because it becomes too involved, so that I don't get these things out by Friday. You know what I'm saying? I could be here for a couple of weeks trying to figure that stuff out. All right. So next, the days of Seth. Now Seth lived 205 years and begot Enosh. Okay, so here we go with a little map. 205 years, Enosh ben Seth will be his name. 707 years after that, for a total of 912 years. Seth died at 912 years old. And one of the things a person should ask themselves, especially around this time in the Bible, is why on earth are people living so long? How are they so old? How are they so aged? Now, only thing I can understand is, one thing I can explain is this. You have science that tries to explain that, well, the atmosphere was dense or something like that, they try to say, and allowed for life to live a lot longer. I don't know so much about that. I don't know. I don't know if that's true or not. I don't even know if it was true today, would that allow man to live much longer? Only thing that makes sense to me, though, is that perhaps either the calendar may have been different, but we can see that if there was a calendar that existed here, it's definitely a different calendar by the time Noah enters that ark, because the flood waters are on the planet for about half a year, okay? And then I think it takes a whole entire year for the waters to assuage, okay? And so that gives an idea of what a year is like. And so maybe they may have been following some different time restraints or had a different way of measuring and marking time in this particular era or generation. I don't know. It's hard to say because the Bible doesn't say. So all we can do is just speculate. And if anybody says what they're saying is true, if anybody says their speculations are true, they are a liar, because the Bible does not agree with them anywhere. Now, what we do find out, though, in parallel comparison, is that in Enoch's book, which I cannot say for sure is 100% accurate or factual, there is a calendrical system in that book, or cylindrical system in that book, that explains a very detailed calendar, even from Enoch's time. And Enoch, we find, is halfway through this bloodline. So, but yet the ages are still high in number. I don't know where that comes from. I really can't explain that. And I haven't heard any theory explained to me of satisfaction. I can't. I haven't. So I guess it's one of those subjects that's best left alone, because all people do is mess it up, you know. Let me see. So I keep seeing this word buttocks. What? And he will live, set, buttocks. The heck? All right, so the word Enosh. Seth's son was called Enosh, which means mortal, frail, miserable. It is from the root anash, to be incurable, used of a wound, grief, woe, sickness, or wickedness. It was in the days of Enosh, or Enosh, that men began to defile the name of the living God. I'm sure you're familiar with that verse. I think that verse is coming up, actually. But so Enosh means the son of Seth, a mortal man, a man, person of mankind. So far we have man, appointed, mortality. Okay, it keeps building. The message that it's trying to convey, or that's embedded in this genealogy, I hope you see how it's building. Let's move on. Okay. Whoa, no, I got some more stuff right here. 205 years is a long time to live with just 3 people. I covered that already. Genesis 4:26 is often mistranslated. Targum of Ankelos, desisted from praying in the name. Targum of Jonathan, surnamed their idols in the name. Okay, basically what it's talking about Enosh. It says when he was born, men started to call on God, but actually, there's an argument about how that should be translated, because in some places it should be, like in Targum of Ankelos. Now, Targum is a book that is the Hebrew Bible that has been translated into Aramaic. Okay, and so you have several different versions of the Targum walking around or available to you. You have the Targum of Ankelos, you have the Targum of Jonathan, you have the Targum of Jerusalem. I can't remember. Hey, look, it's just a lot of stuff to remember. Trust me. So that one says desisted from praying in the name, or the most holy name. Then that's what that verse should say. When Enosh was born, men started to desist from praying in the name. And Targum of Jonathan says, when Enosh was born, men started to name their idols in the name. Okay, Kinshi, Rashi, and other ancient Jewish commentators agree. Jerome indicates that this was the opinion of many Jews of his day. Maimonides commentary on the Mishnah, a constitution part of the Talmud, the origin of idolatry to the days of Enosh. So anyway, what it's basically saying is that they say during Enosh's day, men started to yield to idolatry. And instead of calling on the name of God, they started calling on the name of other gods, or started naming their idols different god names or whatever. That's basically what I'm saying here. And Seth lived after his begetting Enosh 707 years. He begot sons and daughters who are not mentioned yet again. Lifespan is getting short, if you notice. There is a theory that Enosh is a new breed of man, or a new species that's more prone to easier death, which will coincide with Genesis 6:3. I'm not saying Genesis 6:3 mentions that. I'm just saying that about that time, God gets fed up with man and say, hey, look, you got to die, brother. I'm going after the life that's in you. I'm going after the air you breathe. And I'm just talking about one of the theories surrounding this account, because there are so many theories that about, I guess, up to Genesis chapter, up to Genesis chapter 10, it starts to calm down. People with their wild fantasies and their wild ideologies and dogma start to calm down about Genesis 10. But Genesis 9 through 1, it's fair game for all this make-believe stuff. You know, I mean, I can get with the aliens coming down and having intercourse with women. I can get with that. I can understand how you can see that in Genesis chapter 6. And then I see how that kind of correlates to some stuff that happened in the Egyptian mythology and the Babylonian and Sumerian, Akkadian mythology. And I can see how that can mimic the story of the Anunnaki. I can see it. It makes sense. Although the Bible does not call it Anunnaki, but there's a race of giants in the Bible called the Anakim. So that is close relation. Okay? But, and we do understand that these people are the people from whence Abraham himself come. So that gives a little bit more validity to the story. Now, I'm one to argue the Anunnaki story because it's so fantastical and it doesn't quite line up like I would want it to say the Bible plagiarized from that. I don't believe there's a plagiarism. I believe that someone over here may have made an account, someone over there may have made an account, someone over there had made an account. Maybe perhaps there were 5 or 6, I don't know, different versions walking around, and each person had a different version of the same exact story. Just like if you was to watch the evening news, you know, on ABC, NBC, and CBS, you get 3 different versions of them. And don't throw, there's a CNN and some other channels out there. You get sometimes 5 different stories of the same piece of news. And sometimes you get the exact same version of the news, as if they all plagiarize each other or use one reporting of the story and then just retold it 5 different times. But so that's how I see the story, because you also have a flood story in another civilization. And then, like, that's how I see the Gospels. Somebody was to ask the question, why are there 4 different stories of the same, 4 different versions of the same story being told in the Bible? Why don't you just use one? Well, I appreciate that, because if you watch the news on 4 different channels, you get a more rounded version of what happened than just watching on one channel. I'll say that and I'll leave it alone because I'm going a little too long here. And Seth lived after the beginning. Enosh 7. Okay, we already read that. Lifespan is getting shorter. Enosh, they say, was a new species of man. But I understand how they can derive at that, because Enosh means mortal or mortality, you know, or the word for man actually kind of changed a bit. And Enosh became a new word for a man, so to speak. I hope I'm making sense, but I got to run, so I'm going to keep on going. I don't want to develop that thought too much. In all the days of Seth, there were 912 years, and he died. First place, days equals years. Okay? That's what I'm noticing. The first place where days equals years. Notice it says, all the days of Seth were 912 years. Hey, that's unique. All the days. Now, I should say all the years of Seth were 912 years. But this says all the days of Seth were 912 years. Just, you could do some word studies on that and find out how deep the word yom. The word yom is the Hebrew word for day. How deep it gets. How involved it gets. How it means much more than just 24-hour day. Which gives validity to the fact that the 7 days of creation probably weren't 24-hour days. There's some miraculous things that happen within those days that make them not 24-hour days. I'll get more into that into the flood because the flood really helps me illustrate that point home. Okay, yeah. And Enosh lived 190 years and begot Canaan. Okay. The age of Adam when Cain was born is not given. Why? This is something I noticed. Something I noticed I wanted to bring up to your attention. And something you should ask yourself. The age of Adam when he gave birth to Abel and Cain were never mentioned. Why? Why not? Why is it being mentioned now? It's because we're targeting a specific person in a genealogy. Or we have someone we're looking forward to, a hero, so to speak, and we need to know how long it took in him coming, or are these ages actually gematria codes that we should look up? I'll put it to you like this. In the Hebrew, when you look at the age of the person, you don't see the Hebrew letters being used as numbers. You actually see the number being spelled out. Like, here's a number here, Tesha'in, and Shana is a year. That's the word year. So it's not like you can see, like that monster, that monster lady was saying that the monster logo was saying 666 on a. It's not numerals. We don't see numerals being used here, but we see the spelling of words. So that kind of refutes the idea that perhaps this is gematria code, or perhaps if we did render it as the code, because we could still do that. We could still take the number. We could take the number 905 and use Hebrew letters to render it, and perhaps we might see it a gematria code. I'm not saying it is because I haven't tried it. I don't know. But anyway, the age of Adam. Okay, so yeah. So Canaan means fixed in the antediluvian. Canaan. I hate that. That's from Strong's Concordance. I don't like that too much. I'd rather use this definition I have right here in the middle. Canaan, Enosh's son was named Canaan, which can mean sorrow, dirge, or elegy. Precise denotation is somewhat elusive. Some study aids, unfortunately, presume that Canaan is synonymous with Canaan. Okay? So anyway, sorrow is the word we'll borrow. And you'll see how this message continues. I'll when it's all said and done, I'll go back to the message that was enlisted in this chapter, and I'll go back and I'll tell you exactly what it says. Okay? Next verse. And Enosh lived after his begetting Canaan 715 years, and he begot sons and daughters. All right. Begot sons and daughters of which are not numbered, named, or beyond mere mention. All right. And all the days of Enosh were 905 years, and he died. Okay. Now the question that enters my mind is, okay, what's death like? We keep hearing about death in this book. What is death like to these people? I mean, it's a long time into the book before we hear anything about an afterlife. But is death something that they feared, something they look forward to, something they knew about? And when Enoch comes to the planet and avoids it, is that something to be coveted? Yeah, I want to avoid death. I want to be like Enoch. I want to avoid death. Or is death like a miserable concept in this time period? Because I know that life had to be somewhat of a misery because they were around people who were performing all manner of wickedness. And life was not so easy during this period of time because the ground was cursed. Remember? The ground was cursed with Adam, and the ground got even more cursed with Canaan. And so I know it made it difficult for the earth to yield its produce, So, and I know during this time, not too much technology was invented. We find out through Canaan's lineage that many of his offspring were responsible for technological advances. We find nothing like that in Adam's lineage. At least that's not the focus of their identity. All right. Okay, next. Let's see. Right here. Okay. And Canaan lived 100, it says 170 years, and he begot Maleleel. Okay, so this map over here says Canaan was 170. Maleleel ben Canaan was 700. He lived 740 years. So he was 170 years when he gave birth to that brother. And I do say give birth to him because I believe that when a man ejaculates, the seed that is actually germinated inside of a woman, that's kind of a birth, right? So 740 years he lived after him for a total of 910 years. Okay, so Mahalalel, Canaan's son was Mahalalel, from Mahala, which means blessed or praise, and El, the name of God. Thus, Mahalalel means blessed God. Often Hebrew names include El, the name of God, is as in Daniel, God is my judge, etc. Okay? All right, let's go on. Verse 13. And Canaan lived after his beginning Mahalalel 740 years, and he begot sons and daughters. All right, let's keep on going. A lot less notes than I thought I wrote down. Okay, and the days of Canaan were 910 years, and he died. Okay, and this here says an L, but another rendering says H. Okay, Maleleel lived 165 years, and he begot Yered. I don't say Jared because there's no J in the Hebrew alphabet. The letter J is really the letter I, and whenever a word started with the letter I, English scribes would put a decorative tail on it and make it look like the J that we have today. Now, the letter J is only as old as about 1540. I could be wrong on an exact date, but it's around 16th century when this letter was created. I don't want to get into that, but yeah, just something of note. How about that? So Mahalalel is 165. He birthed Jared bin Mahalalel, and he lives for 730 more years. Just imagine what you can do in that amount of time, or how well you can raise your children in that amount of time. Amazing. And he dies at 895. I think he's the youngest death thus far is Mahalalel. All right. So Yered, Mahalalel's son, was named Yared from the verb yarad, meaning shall come down. Yarad. All right. And as you can see over here, I got it from a lexicon. Yered is descent. Yered, the name of an antediluvian. I get tired of that definition. So descent coincides with shall come down. All right. And Mahalalel lived after his beginning Yared 730 years, and he begot sons and daughters, of which none of them stood out to be mentioned. or did anything significant that they could mention, interrupt the ongoing genealogy to mention them. I'm not saying they didn't do anything. One of them could have invented the chariot for all I know, but it's insignificant compared to what we're doing here, or compared to the person that we're focusing on to bring up. And all the days of Mahalalel were 895 years, and he died. And 895. All right. And Yared lived 106 and 2 years and begot Enoch. So Yared is 162 when he gives birth to Enoch ben Yared. He lives for 800 more years, dies at 962. All right, so let's go over here. Enoch. Let's look at how you say his name for real. All right, that will take us to the Hebrew columns right over here. Enoch is actually pronounced Chanok. Initiated Chanok and antediluvian, blah blah blah. All right, so Enoch was the name of the first son of Cain. In this, so that's what Cain named his first son, Chanok. So I mean, when I say there's some kind of trade-off, it makes me wonder, because some of the names in Cain's genealogy actually mimic the same names as Adam's. Now, I don't know what's going on here. I don't know if those 230 years that Adam and Eve just sat back, not doing anything, not having children, nothing like that, not being a parent. I don't know if Cain was on the other side of the world or on the other side of a territory, just spit him out. Bam, 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 bam. Was his lineage like just running rampant? Was he like having a whole full population over there? Or are we to deduce that man himself, no matter what lineage he belonged to, would wait up until the hundreds, until he was 100 and something years old before he had a child? Is that what we're supposed to take from this? That, okay, if this happened with Adam's genealogy, perhaps it happened with Cain's too. And so perhaps they're sort of rivaling each other, birth here, birth there, birth here, birth there, birth here, birth there. But from the way it's presented in the book, the Bible, it makes it seem like Cain has a big, huge head start on Adam. And it's like, Adam, you got some catching up to do. Right? And as we can see, this whole process takes about 1,000 years out of the Adamites' existence. Because when Adam dies, I think Adam is alive once Noah. I think Adam is alive at the same time as Noah. I think he dies during Noah's time. I'm not sure, but like I said, it's going to take some math to sort that out. But I believe I'm accurate about that, if I'm not mistaken, because I did at one time I did study that years ago, so my memory is kind of weak on that. And Chanok, Jared's son, was named Chanok, which means teaching or commencement. He was the first of 4 generations of preachers. In fact, the earliest recorded prophecy was by Chanok, which amazingly enough deals with the second coming of Christ, although it is quoted in the book of Jude in the New Testament. Okay, so many of you may not be aware, so let me mention this here. In the book of Jude, verse 14 and 15, it mentions Chanok's prophecy. But you might be asking yourself, I don't see this anywhere. Where did Jude get this from? Because at one point in time, the book of Chanok, or the book of Enoch, was well in circulation and and many of the students of Hebrew were made aware of what was in that book, and it was taught publicly and openly. But somehow it's been suppressed, especially with the advent of the King James Bible and some things that I'm not sure who's responsible for suppressing that. I'm not sure if it's the Catholic Church or who to blame. It doesn't matter. It's just that it's available to us now thanks to the Nag Hammadi Library, or the finding of the Nag Hammadi Library, which this book was preserved in Ethiopia. Let's go back. And Yared lived after his begetting Enoch 800 years, and he begot sons and daughters. And all the days of Yared were 962 years. 962 years. And he died. All right. And Enoch lived 165 years, and became the father of Methuselah. So Enoch is 165 years old when Methuselah ben Enoch is born. 200 more years after that, he dies at the age of 365. All right, so let's look at the Hebrew over here. Methuselah, okay, or Methuselah, man of a dart. Methuselah and antediluvian, they all keep saying that. So Methuselah comes from mut, a root that means death, and from shalach, which means to bring or to send forth. The name Methuselah means his death shall bring forth. All right, those are the shortened days of Enoch. All right. And indeed okay. All right. And Enoch was well pleasing to God. After his begetting Methuselah, 200 years, and he begot sons and daughters. Okay. He wasn't well pleasing to God before he begot Methuselah. That's the kind of way that's how I think about things when I read the Bible. Now, when it says one thing, I automatically think of the opposite thing it's not saying. So I'm not saying the Bible's saying that. That's just the way I thought. This is a thought that came in my head. I'm like, he was. After he gave birth to Methuselah, he was well pleasing to God. Well, what about before? He wasn't pleasing to God before. Did he get his act together when he gave birth to Methuselah? What happened? Something. The thing about it is that a lot of life is happening in these gentlemen's timeline and these gentlemen's life, and they live in a long life for a lot of stuff to happen. And you would think that, okay, if you live that long, that means you got a lot of time to get things right. A lot of time to learn some things, because a lot of time to master some things. But it doesn't seem to be working out that way. It seems to be that the longer they live, the more corrupt they become. And I think this is one of the first mentions of somebody who pleased God. It's like, wow, it took a while for that brother to pop up on a planet. And I'm like, you're so far removed. Well, it could be as Adam is living all the time, all the while these guys are living, he may be instructing them. He may be operating as a priest at this point in time, because knows that during his time, his sons brought offerings to the Most High. We still don't know if they sacrificed those animals themselves by slaughtering them, or did Adam build an altar back then and they had brought it to his altar and he presided as a priest over their sacrificial offering. So don't tell him. The Bible is silent on it. And I'm not going to make up anything where the Bible is silent on. So I can use my imagination to fill in some of the blanks, but it's not 100% accurate. And like I said, you can read it's a way to read the Bible forensically and psychologically to find out what is not being mentioned, but you can only get so far. You can only get so far with that. All right. And the days of Hanok were 365 years. Isn't that funny? Because 365 days is a day of a complete calendar of our time. And however, let us not forget that Hanok comes up with a very detailed calendar, or explains a very detailed calendar in the book that he writes, or in the book that is attributed to him. Because I think that's one of the problems as to why his book doesn't appear in the scripture, because you have some people who want to call it a pseudeographer. Pseudeographer means that the author of the book is false, or they don't know who the author of the book is. All right. So with Enoch, I think what happens is some scholars are like, it's really a stretch to say Enoch wrote this, because when you read the book of Enoch, it sounds so Christian in certain parts of it. It's some of the exact same words, some of the exact same jargon that Christians and the New Testament use. And it will automatically give somebody pause and make them wonder, was this really written by Enoch? You mean to tell me this written by Enoch way back in Adam's time? I find it hard to believe. So that's probably why I didn't wind up in the book at all. All right. And Enoch was well pleasing God and was not found because God translated him. Okay. I wonder if anyone saw him be translated, or did the narrator see him being translated, like Elijah? Because I wonder how, the guy who's narrating this, somebody is narrating chapter 5, because they are speaking in second person. All right. And so I wonder if any of this they can attest to themselves as being an eyewitness to these accounts, or is it just, I'm writing down the oral story? I wonder which way. I wonder how does it work? Like I said again, we can speculate, but there's nothing to really prove one way or another. All right. So, or is that why they were so adamant about watching Elijah be translated? Because the same thing happens to Eliyahu. Okay, he is. He asks God, "Look, I got to get out of here," and God says, "All right, blah blah blah," and gives him all the details about his departure. And so he catches him in a whirlwind, and he travels up to the chariot of fire, which sounds like unworldly technology to me. All right, and I'll leave that alone until we get there. But there was a group of people that was around Eliyahu that said, "Nah, man, I'm gonna watch you and see when God comes take you. I'm gonna be there to watch you." And Elisha was adamant about being there and said, I want a double portion of your power, et cetera, et cetera. So he made sure that he was by his side the whole time. And so I wonder if that's where they got this belief system from. I gotta be near you to see you translated, and I will get a portion of your power. I wonder if they got it from the story of Hanoch. I wonder if there was someone around when he was translated, and then that person walked around in his power, which taught them the same thing. And they had to wait until Eliyahu's time before somebody else was translated, before they could use that information. I don't know. Speculation at best. Speculation. Okay. So And Anoch was well pleasing. Okay, blah blah blah. Some reason I got the word lakach. Okay, lakach. Okay, that's the word translated. I got it over here in the Hebrew column. Lakach, accept, bring, buy, carry away, drawn, fetch, get, enfold, many, mingle, place, receive, reserve, seize, send for, take away. Okay, so all this is the word lakach, which is translated as the word translated here in verse 24, right? So that is the Hebrew word for the word translated, okay? Which means to all these different things. So that is there to give you more insight as to what that word actually means. And if you used it correctly, bravo. All right. And Methuselah lives 167 years and begot Lamech. All right. So Lamech means from the unused root of uncertain meaning, Lamech, the name of two antediluvian patriarchs, Lamech. All right. So it's funny. That's another name that Canaanites are sharing. Okay. Because Cain has grandson named Lamech, something like that, right? And so does Adam. As a matter of fact, I think Malaliel or Methuselah also is twinned over there in the Canaanites genealogy. I think that's worthy of study and worth doing. Is taking Cain's genealogy, comparing it to Adam's genealogy, and finding out where the correlations reside. All right, and it's worth the study because I think there's something hidden there too. I think we're not getting the full story. So Methuselah's son was named Lamech, a root still evident today in our own English word lament or lamentation. Lamech suggests despairing. Okay. Okay. Methuselah was 167. Lamech ben Methuselah he lived 802 years after that and died at 969. So far, he holds the Genesis Book of World Records as the oldest person on earth. I don't know if that's true or not. I'm just saying he's the oldest person in the Bible. And yeah. And Methuselah lived after his begetting Lamech 802 years and begot sons and daughters. Okay? And all the days of Methuselah which he lived were 969 years, and he died. So these are the days of Lamech. And Lamech lived 188 years and begot a son. So Lamech was 188 years old when Noach ben Lamech was born. Okay? And he lived for 565 more years after that, and he died at 753 years old. Okay? And he called his name Noah, saying, "This one will cause us to cease from our works and from the toils of our hands and from the earth which the Lord God has cursed." Okay. I'm not quite sure what his father was expecting, but this is only the second prophecy in the book so far. The first prophecy is to Eve about her child would crush the head of the serpent while the serpent will crush his heel, something like that. And it makes me think about this for a second. When people give a prophecy, I don't think they're really aware of how that prophecy will come to bear. All right? Because when he said, this one will cause us to cease from our works and from the toils of our hands and from the earth which the Lord God has cursed. They may have looked at him in favor about that. He said, oh, you're going to be our great savior. You're going to save us from having to work so hard on the earth. But in actuality, I come to kill the majority of you. You know, my coming onto this earth means I'm going to usher in the judgment of God against you, which is going to take out like 98% of you guys, or maybe a little bit more than that. I don't know the exact figures. But I'm going to take you guys out. That's how I'm going to cause you to cease from your works and your toil. All right? And given that too, because of the curses of God on the earth, and we know that famine is one of the curses of God on the earth. Okay? So we know if they were experiencing a famine during that time, it was by the sweat of their brow they were eating their bread. Then that means if there was a water source, they had to struggle to get that water source from over there to over here where fertile land was. For those who didn't set up shop near riverbeds or anything like that. So that could have been the struggles of the limitations of their technology. All right. And I know it was very laborious. And so they may have looked at him as a hero because of that, but unfortunately, he had another part to play. He could have been a hero if majority of them listened to him, if they would have listened to him and embraced the message that came from Noah. But because they were so obstinate, unfortunately, you know, large amount of them missed out on that message. I guess, okay? Because we do have another flood story available to us, written by the Sumerians, about Utnapishtim, okay? And how he survived the flood by doing the same thing as Noah did. Now, some people want to say, these are the same people. I'm not too quick to believe that. I'm not. What I would like to believe is that before I believe that is that the same plan God gave to Noah, he could have given to another human being elsewhere. All right. And besides that, I don't believe that this flood was global. No, I believe this flood was local. And there's a reason why. There's a reason why. I don't believe it's, yeah. I'll go ahead and leave that alone. And he called his name Noah. Okay, let's go. Okay, Noah, Lamech, of course, is the father of Noah, which is derived from Nacham, to bring relief or comfort, as Lamech himself explains in Genesis 5:29. All right, and Lamech lived after his beginning Noah 565 years, and he got sons and daughters, of which we have none of their names. And all the days of Lamech were 753 years, and he died. Okay. Now, this will be available to you if you so need. You can just come to the sWordSmith website or the sWordSmith group, and it will be in there for you to download at your leisure. All right. So what I'm doing now is I'm getting you guys to the screen where I said I would explain all those collection of names and what they mean. Okay. So I'm not going to do what this page does because this page starts with God. I'm not doing that. All right. I'm going to start with Adam, which meant man, right? Seth means appointed. Remember that? Okay. Enosh means mortal man. So let me just read the message without trying to explain what each of them means all over again. Okay. here it is. Man is appointed, man is appointed, a mortal man of sorrow is born. The glory of God shall come down, instructing that his death shall bring those in despair comfort and rest. Now, a lot of people who are made privy to this information in the genealogy of Adam say this is about the Messiah. Okay? Because I guess what happens is the most important part about this is you got to read the God man. All right. And a lot of people look at Jesus or Yeshua as the God man. All right. That's why I don't want to put God in it, because I don't want to inflate the meaning unnecessarily when the scripture itself doesn't do that. Okay. So man is appointed, a mortal man of sorrow is born. The glory of God shall come down, instructing that his death shall bring those in despair comfort and rest. Is some of those definitions are stretches. I'm going to admit that, and some of those definitions are a little bit embellished, but overall, I agree with the message. I did the research myself in those names, and in some of the names I couldn't take the bare bones definition of. I had to go into the root word definition and accept it that way. I'm just going to be honest, okay? And it does come out that way. It does come out something like that. But some of them look at it as if this is foretelling of the Messiah. It could very well be. I don't know. I don't know. I see that he is not mentioned as an actual person that comes to bear sins or comes to. Actually, I don't look at the Messiah as one to come to bear sins. Me, myself. I look at the Messiah as the administrator of God's judgment. That's what he said he came to do many, many times. And in his job of removing sin, I don't believe that he took them upon himself, their sins, so to speak. I believe that what he did was he made them knowledgeable of their sin and redirected their way of living and was able to save those who were at fault. And by saving them, I do not believe that he just waved the magic wand and said, praying, you are saved, my brother. I'll meet you in heaven. I believe what he did was he said, you're in error. This method of following God is erroneous. How you straighten this all out is by doing these things I'm teaching you to do. Do these things instead of that. And and the way he literally saved is by telling his followers, this place is set for demolition. God is bringing his judgment upon you. And he warned them. Like, you Pharisees, you are going to taste the brunt of God's judgment. He warned them in parables. Every last parable is almost about the destruction that was for to come. And it did come. And the evidence of that destruction, that destruction came at the hands of the Romans. Okay? And in 70 AD, it led to the demolishing of that temple. And it led to Israelites being slow. It led to the death of over 1 million Israelites. And the ones that survived were sold into slavery. All right. Now, that's another story. I don't want to get too far into that, but that's just to support this idea of the prophecy in Genesis 5. All right. So that's it. I'll be back with Genesis 6, which I have done already. I just need some time to present it. I should be doing that I should be doing that tomorrow. Okay. But to you guys, you won't know what tomorrow is because you're living in a video land. All right, so you guys have a good time. Take care. I hope you learn some things. I hope it stretched your mind and helped you think about the Bible in a different way and helps you see what's right before your eyes in a different way, because that's what this is all about. This is about getting away from the old Christian way of reading your book and realizing that it's your book, yours, okay? You paid money for it, and so get the most out of it. And hopefully what you're learning to do is apply the Wandelian method to see this book in a different light, you know? And I hope you're learning to use the principles of hermeneutics, because that's what we're using here. We're using, not so much all the principles of hermeneutics thus far. There's much more to come up when we start seeing dialogue between people. There's much more to use. But here, so far, these are the principles I've been using to come up with the information that I've been coming up with. And I invite you to join sWordSmith. Did I say sWordSmith? Yeah, sWordSmith. It's a page, and it's also a group. It's a group there open to the most elitist of this faith. People who think outside the box, who cannot be confined by a title or a position, and who are themselves self-made scholars. Who want to do the study themselves instead of relying on someone else. So the invitation is open to join. You can always stop by the page and get some morsels of information, because there is a lot of information on that page as far as geological and geographical evidence, debate videos, and also ancient Hebrew information and learning. The thing I can think of off the top of my head is about the measurement system that they use. It's converted into the American system of measurement for your pleasure. Anyway, there's information being added all the time there, and it might be a place you want to call home, because it's a place of information that you can't seem to find anywhere else. All right. So anyway, I'll see you guys. Have a good night. Take care.